Welcome to this edition of Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. I'm Chris Cordani, your host. Recently, former President Donald Trump's home was raided by the FBI. It's a clear case of the people in power using the three-letter agencies like the FBI, or in other cases, the CIA, IRS, or DOJ against a political enemy. This will not stop at somebody like Donald Trump, who has all sorts of lawyers to defend themselves. It could happen to you, the little guy. It could happen to anybody. This is a real problem. It's also not new. Do you remember when the whole issue with Lois Lerner and Barack Obama and the IRS going after conservative groups? Yes, this has happened before. We need to put a stop to it. With us from the Herb London Center for Policy Research is our panel. We have the London Center for Policy Research President Tony Shaffer, Lieutenant Colonel retired, Ambassador Hank Cooper, who is on our board of directors, and Distinguished Fellow Navy Captain Pete O'Brien, retired. Gentlemen, as I said before, this is not new.
Notable to the history of this sort of thing is a Congress member named Curt Weldon. Curt Weldon was a congressman from Pennsylvania. He was the number 2 guy in the House Armed Services Committee. And because he had raised a number of issues, not just able danger, which is what I testified on, he was into turning over all sorts of rocks. The FBI was able to, under Bush, this is under Bush too, this is not under a Democrat regime, went after him, put him under investigation, and did a raid on his campaign headquarters a week before his election, and he lost. And a lot of folks think that that was done to cause the effect it did, which was to create a perception that he was compromised. He wasn't. He was never charged. He never did anything wrong. But it was that perception that was important. So I want this to be clear that this happens to anybody who's essentially the enemy of the political establishment. It doesn't have to be left or right. We saw during the 2016 cycle, both sides being targeted. 2020, when the Democrats were out, Tulsi Gabbard was targeted by her own party because they didn't want her to do things. So the point being is that it's not left or right. It's the establishment willing to act on its own interests. And so the FBI, CIA, and all these other organizations are more than willing to jump in with the party of their interest, who they think will get them the farthest. In this case, you mentioned like Michael Flynn. They were all in on going after him because of what he said he was going to do to disrupt what they were doing. This thing recently with Roger Stone. All these folks who are targeted have an agenda to disrupt the establishment. And because of that, the establishment's more than happy to abuse its authority to go after these guys, and it does. And I think that's the key here, is that so much of what we see, to include President Trump now, is a complete diminution of the rule of law. And in the case of Trump, we still don't know exactly what they took. You're supposed to have a clear list of what you're after and what you take. You don't have that, as far as I know. You're supposed to have a clear understanding of the authorities and what you're supposed to give the subpoena to the person who's there. Didn't do that. So there's all these things that clearly they didn't do. And I don't think it's about the Document Preservation Act for a minute. I think this is about 6 January. And the notable thing, Chris, to your point, is often, even if they never charge you, it's the process is the penalty. Just getting you arrested, having you go through that process, just grinding you down through that process of having to deal with the legal system, the expenses, that itself can be the punishment. And I think that's where we see on a lot of this. And yes, if you think Donald Trump, it's bad for Donald Trump, imagine someone like one of us having to go through that whole circus. So
this is also a warning, I believe, at least, this is also a warning from those same powers in the establishment to other people who dare speak out against them.
Yep, no doubt.
And you have to consider the fact that a lot of the mainstream media are associated with at least this administration. And so they amplify, cut and paste, and whatever to manufacture a message that isn't even, some cases, part of what they took their material from.
That's right.
So it's a very dangerous period in which we're living right now.
Yeah,
Hank, to that point, I just saw recently, within the last couple of days, what's her name? School marm from the Washington Post, or is it New York Times? Maggie Haberman, who apparently has a poop and pee fetish, who was scoping out the toilets of the White House trying to find papers that supposedly. I'm not joking. I mean, you can't make this up.
That's
No,
real
I don't believe
muckraking,
for a
huh?
minute that didn't happen.
That's low-tech intrusion. I was thinking of high-tech intrusion.
Maggie, seek help. If you've watched this, go talk to someone, please. Just say.
I'll just throw in an example from someone that I know who was charged for certain violations while he was on active duty. He was a one-star officer, charged on active duty, placed in essentially an administrative limbo for 2 years on active duty, and then I think 3 years after, or actually it was almost 3 years on active duty, and then 3 years after that, and the case finally got into trial. And I'll just before he actually got to trial, he was actually arrested one night. This is a guy who has served his nation honorably, and last time I checked, you are in fact innocent until proven guilty. And a federal SWAT team showed up at his house. This is well after they've gone through all this thing, and he's been named, etc. He has a lawyer. The SWAT team showed up at his house on a weekend night after close of business. After he was in. My recollection was he was in bed. He and his wife were in bed, banging on the door. Federal SWAT team shows up. They ransacked the house. They arrested him. His wife standing on the front lawn for several hours in her bathrobe. They take him off to jail in the middle of the night, handcuffed, as if he's a violent criminal. And then it grinds. So he spent 2 nights in the Hoosgow while they're trying to arrange bail. And then several more years grind by, during which time he doesn't really have a job, and is getting ground down by the system. He's not rich. He had a Navy retirement at that point, but that's being consumed by legal fees. And he was finally completely acquitted. Nothing that they charged him with stuck, but a life of trauma for 5 years, 6 years. The horror of being dragged away in the middle of the night by federal police, and there was nothing to it.
Right. So this is where the reform has to come into it, because Pete, he should be due some sort of compensation for all of that pain. And I mean, and all too often, the bureaucrats inside the government will act without any regard to the damage that's going to be done to someone who turns out to be completely exonerated or innocent.
Well, and there used to be an understanding, and there still is, I assume, in most jurisdictions, at least state and local levels, is if I'm charging you with something and it's a non-violent event, and you're a person with an exemplary record, I call up your lawyer and say, hey, can you have Tony down at the court on Monday morning? We're going to officially charge him, then we'll, of
course,
and you can have him out, and but we have to go through the process, and I'm informing you to have him there.
Right.
And that takes place in most jurisdictions around the country.
It's only when they want to make a point.
Do that?
Yeah, no, it's just when they want to make a point to punish folks. That's why they do it. Roger Stone is a great example. Roger Stone he's not a flight risk. He's an old guy with an old, his wife is old. I mean, it was all done to create the effect of pain and punishment. That's what it was done for. And and I it's interesting. They didn't get Trump directly on this. That is to say that they did the raid on Mar-a-Lago when Trump wasn't there, but it was very clearly made to intimidate him and the family members who were there. And I sat. I think you've heard this story before, and I won't go into it long. I sat across from Laura Trump up in New York at Trump Tower, and we were talking about when Donald Trump announced his run for president, and he pulled the family in, and we sat down, and he said to them, it's like, I know you're all supportive of me running, but this is going to change our lives because we're all going to become targets. So Trump knew that this would create conditions for them to all be targets because he's not going to comply with the deep state, whatever you want to call it. I don't care what you call that morass of the Democrat Party and media and government, whatever that is. He knew that he would become the enemy of it. The family would pay that price, and sure enough, it has happened. So
The interesting thing about Roger Stone versus Donald Trump when it came to all this, Roger Stone has been a political enemy that they couldn't catch or get for all these years until he became associated with Donald Trump, and it became more, as I'll say, quote unquote, acceptable. Thing about Donald Trump, while Roger Stone was always blatant about uncovering what's been going on, I don't think he even cared which party was what when it came to that.
right.
Donald Trump, they fear him, and the people in this establishment fear him because he hung out with them. He donated to them all these years. He was at their parties. This man doesn't drink. When I joke about the sober guy at the parties knows all your secrets, this is the sober guy, literally. But he also was the guy that donated. He knows what goes on behind the scenes, and I'm sure the man was chomping at the bit to get a second term to expose a lot of this. And this is what they're afraid of if he becomes president again. However, this raid may have elected him president.
Well, apparently there's record fundraising already ongoing because of this. And I've said in several interviews, the last thing they want to do is turn Donald Trump into a martyr by actually doing something to convict, basically charge him, or do something to make him a criminal, and somehow do that. I think it'll be worse for them. And yeah, I don't think, my colleagues may disagree with me, but I don't think he went far enough. All of us on this session have had to face the bureaucracy in some form. And it's interesting. I think I know this may sound strange. I don't consider any of us here partisan. We're not partisan. We're real. And I think the fact is, you have elements of the government which are compromised to the point of where they respond only to a single political party, and they use that power to abuse anybody who's not part of that party. And that's what the danger is here, and that's what we're against. There should be a functioning bureaucracy that is neutral, politically neutral, that does the hard work of common defense and essentially does those things which have to be done by a federal bureaucracy. And the 10th Amendment, I think, needs to be examined because the federal bureaucracy has absorbed all sorts of powers, to include some of the stuff we're talking about here regarding law enforcement. I don't think they should have. As a matter of fact, one of the proposals that I would do is, like, any enforcement of anything like this needs to be done through the sheriffs from now on. Sheriffs need to be the ones who are asked to go help do a raid, and then you can have feds go along with them, but you need to do it all local, because the feds clearly do not have the best interest of that community or those people in mind when they do something like this.
If you like what we're doing here, and if you enjoy our videos, please hit the subscribe button and consider becoming a member of our program, either on YouTube or on Patreon. That's patreon.com/thought2action. Also, if you don't have the money to do that right now, we do have 3 tiers. There are different ways to join and help us out with this and help us produce the content. However, what would also really help us out is if you comment, like, and share this video on your social media with your friends and colleagues. We'd love to know what you and everybody else that who you discuss these things with think about what we're talking about, and spread the word. These issues are very important. Gentlemen, here's another thing, and this is what really bothers me. There are a few things that really bother me, so I can't just say this is what really bothers me, but this is another thing that bothers me quite a bit about weaponizing the 3-letter agencies against regular people and, of course, any kind of political enemy. It looks like these people who are in power now want to put us in a state where the World Economic Forum would enjoy us a little bit more. We talked about taking away rights like the Second Amendment and things like that, and the First Amendment. However, in Britain, I have read about people getting arrested for wrong thinking on social media. If you remember the couple of people who just said something about whatever crowd was protected. Then there was that guy. If you remember the guy that that arranged the alphabet flag into a certain, well, I guess four alphabet flags into a certain pattern, where the black V was arranged to look like a swastika. And then this guy, police pound his door and arrest him just because he put some kind of meme on social media. This is what I believe this current establishment wants to do to us.
Yes. So I think that's the issue, and that's why we saw the witch hunt within DOD back at the beginning of the administration, with Lloyd Austin going through and looking for individuals who have certain symbology on their vehicle. I mean, I think the 3% sticker was targeted. The idea that somehow Nazis were involved in the military. It was all designed to essentially suppress any free thinking or thoughts relating to being a member of the opposite political party. They want to suppress any dissent. And I think that's what we have to be aware of now. So,
Well, aren't they also pushing an agenda rather in addition to just, blocking independent thought? It strikes me that one of the added issues we've got today is that the implicit power of electronics and the pervasive nature of it as it goes ahead. And I think it's only a matter of time before folks who use devious means and even more destructive, potentially, means to go after key things. They've done it before. I mean, they took down the electric power grid. Russia did they not? In Ukraine, was it? I'm trying to remember, several years ago. So there are just all sorts of additional threats that can now be imposed by adversaries of the government itself that would confuse and undercut things in this country that, implicit in our heritage. And the government, if it's not prepared, can't do much about it.
well, I think, Hank, that's the point of Build Back Better and this whole idea of pushing everybody to electric cars. The one thing about electric cars is, first off, they're digital. They're controlled by computers. And secondly, they depend on electrical energy, which means that you have to plug it in very frequently. And if you can get everybody to convert over to those things, you can control the power grid, you can control individuals' access to those cars. And then if someone does not meet up to the government's ideal view of social credit score, which is what the PRC does, the Chinese does, no, you don't get to drive today. It's a punishment.
And guess where all of the many, if not all, but most of the key components are produced. Taiwan is a source,
right,
in the free world, but China itself is a source of minerals and capabilities that do not exist in this country. Most people don't understand that.
Right.
I mean, this is more than a hypothetical threat. This is real.
There's a simple layer to this that keeps circulating back around, keeps coming back up when you hear people talk about what's next, is the issue of the credit card itself. Your credit card it not only allows somebody, Google or whoever, to track you and track your activity. You bought athletic socks at Walmart or whatever. The truth is if I can somehow buy somebody else on an outside force can somehow monitor your credit card activity, I can essentially take that one step further without a great deal of effort and control your activity. If your credit card suddenly is no good outside your home state, you're pretty well restricted to your home state.
Right.
And whenever people need to think about this, whenever you hear talk about eliminating cash and going to a credit card only system, is that gives a malicious authority the ability to literally control your every movement and your every purchase. If you have no cash, if everything is a credit card, and you have a supreme nanny state, they're not going to let you buy pizza and beer,
right?
Because it's not good for you. You have a heart problem, so you don't get pizza and beer, or whatever you have. We think you're trending towards being a diabetic, so no Baskins and Robbins for you.
Or you only get the fake meat stuff. You
Right.
don't
Right.
get to
Or
actual
bugs,
actual
or
meat.
bugs. Don't
You
forget
eat
to eat the
bugs.
bugs.
So
Yeah.
this is no longer a Soylent Green kind of fantasy. These conversations are taking place among supposedly serious people at supposedly important places like Davos, and people need to push back. Then the next time someone says we need to get rid of the $100 bill, we need to the correct response is no, we need to bring back the $500 bill.
Right.
Yeah.
And when people say we need to have a main data bus in your car, the answer is no, we don't. We don't want a main data bus in the car. We don't want the ability to collect data on us passed into the system, and the system is no longer in control by me. My data should be controlled by me.
Once upon a time, everybody read 1984, George Orwell's
Right.
1984. I don't know whether they do that anymore in school because the schools are so bloody corrupted as well in what they teach these days. I don't know whether we're training our young people to deal with these issues. I personally, as an old man at this point, am very concerned about that. I see what's going on around me, and I fear for the country. I really do.
So I think 1984 is something that should be required reading, written by someone, by the way, who was not a conservative.
No,
Orwell recognized the real problems with socialism. He was a socialist, and he recognized, like, if you go down this path to the logical conclusions of where it would reach, it's bad. And he converted himself out of being a socialist by recognizing that Oceania would not be a good place to be. Just saying.
No,
So
neither would the farm. So
But
well, that was another book he wrote, Animal
Yes.
Farm.
right.
which
Yeah.
is
But
almost
Hank
all included.
has put your finger on the issue here. That at the real root, the issue is education, and the twisting of our education. And this is not a recent problem. This is a problem that really took place over the last 140 years. It began in the 1880s in Europe and quickly came to the United States. But there's twisting of education into essentially a socialist bent
I could
curriculum,
just call it Marxism because that's what it is.
and it really was Marxism. There's a couple of key points to it. One of them is, first off, the whole Marxist philosophy of a centrally controlled government in the initial stages of, until you get to the communist utopia, it never shows up, and also the removal of not only morality from society, but also the teaching of morality, the teaching of right and wrong, to people in school, and right and wrong then becomes what is defined by the state, and nothing else.
right.
And so we need to, as Hank puts it so beautifully, is you need to go right back to the issue of education. We need to go back to the issue of what are kids reading in high school? Are kids in high school reading Animal Farm? Are they reading 1984?
That's a good question, and I know some of these high school kids aren't allowed to read Huckleberry Finn or To Kill a Mockingbird. That's
Right.
another
Insane.
story altogether.
Two of the true landmark books of American literature. Right.
Yeah.
This leads us to another, and I want to go back to these three-letter agencies because we all know what happened with Barack Obama going after conservatives and conservative groups via the IRS. Well, the Democrats just signed on another 87,000 person army in the IRS, new agents to go after. I know they're saying, well, we're going to have to go after all these billionaires. How many does it really take to go after billionaires? No. 87,000. We know who they're going after. We're going after people with Venmo accounts who might get $25 to do something.
Well, and think about it,
A
Chris.
little guy.
We had an IRS with I believe was 77,000 agents in it, and we're going to an IRS with 165,000 agents in it. We're more than doubling the size of the IRS. People need to ask themselves very simply: is the problem that bad? That somehow we need to double the size of the IRS? Really?
Mhm.
No, income coming in is at an all-time high for the government. It's not the issue. And then plus,
Right.
just looking at the stats of the current audits, it shows that they are already going after individuals who make less than $100,000. Matter of fact, there's a significant number,
Yep.
more than
Most
half.
of it, actually,
Right.
most of it.
There was a book. There was a book I read, and I want to throw this at you before I forget to you, Hank. Do you guys remember Martin Gross? He was a writer. He did a series of books called the Put Something Here Racket. Did something called has a book called The Tax Racket. I heard him first on the Bob Grant show. He discussed how the IRS worked at one point. This is before the book, when people kind of woke up to what was going on. There was some reform there. Supposedly, at least according to an account in the book, there was a big banner in one of the offices reading "Seize, seize, seize." This is the perception of what we think the IRS is. It was apparently the reality according to the book, and this may be that again.
I would chime in with this, and that is that when you take any organization and the organization's, if you will, metric is how much funds they collect. And if you're an IRS agent, how many cases you start and how much funds you collect from the start. I mean, if you're an IRS agent and you go after Tony Schaefer and you spend a month going after Tony Schaefer, and the end of the month you collect $0. I'm just going to step out here and guess and say you're not going to get a great rating at the end of the
Right. You got to find something. Right.
So you've now gone from 77,000 or 78,000 agents to 165,000 agents. And each one of these guys is being measured on what they produce.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
So
the quotas, if you will.
It doesn't require that you target them. It doesn't require that someone at the top of the agency says, go out there and get these people. It just requires simply that they're just human beings who are sitting in their offices. And the one metric that always comes up whenever you're in an agent organization like this is, how many of these things did you do?
Right.
And what was the result? So they're going to go out and do these things, and they're going to look for results.
Right.
Yes.
And there's not enough rich people to go after constantly. So that means
Right.
that immediately they're going to go to the lower tier. As a matter of fact, the lower tier is easier because they don't have lawyers to support fighting back.
Yeah, they
Right.
can't
And
fight
so
back.
the guy shows up at your door, Chris, and says, you owe us $5,000. The temptation is going to be, well, hell, I can give him, how about I give you 3? And he's going to say, check. And
Yeah.
you're about $3,000.
Well, they
Right.
can nickel and dime you too. It's if they could, you could put your taxes in. Maybe a month later, you get a letter from the IRS stating, well, you owe another $526.
Right.
You're looking at this and saying, no, this doesn't make any sense. My accountant says this, and it's not going to happen. But you could pay your accountant and a lawyer to fight back, which could be double or triple that.
Of course.
Or you could
And
just
they
give
count on that.
Uncle Sam a little more revenue.
Right.
Right.
Yep. That's what's going to happen. So the Democrats they know this, and yet they lie about this all the time. Oh no, it's not going to be like that, even though the stats currently show it is like that, and that all these new agents are only going to go after $400,000 annual income or more. So it's a complete lie. And again, I fault the American people, the Democrats who support the Democrats, for allowing this to happen, because and ironically, I think a lot of them are going to be victimized by this too, because it's not going to be just Republicans they come after. The preponderance will be Republicans, but there's going to be Democrats to go after as well. So those who cannot defend themselves. So,
Well, and I would add, I mean, again, I go back to the simple mechanics, the bureaucratic process of an agent. If you are a drug enforcement agent and they're measuring success by how many kilos of a drug that you brought in over the year, or your office brought in over the year, you're going to go after hauls based upon size, not based upon nastiness of the drug. So there are simple metrics in every bureaucracy that drive the bureaucracy, and for an IRS agent, it's very simple. It's not. This doesn't require any kind of great malicious thought. If I hire an IRS agent to go out and work as an IRS agent, he's going to have to do what an IRS agent does, which is dig through tax returns. And if you double the number of agents, you double the number of tax returns that they're digging through. And the
Right.
process is the same, which means I go after more people.
Right, exactly.
And the idea that somehow this is going to be, it's going to be more fair, there is very little about this that is fair. It's process. It's a process thing, and they're just going to do process. And people need to understand that. And they're not going to care whether you are a member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or a member of the Marxists of America Party. They don't care. They're just going to go down the list of the people in their span of regard, their area of regard, and they're going to, take every fifth return, whatever the heck the number is, and they're going to go after them because it's going to be a process-driven event.
Yep.
And if anybody really believes that they're only going after the billionaires, I guess to sum it all up, I have a bridge to sell you, or at least I'd say I have a bridge to sell you. The problem is, well, I'm afraid the IRS will come after me for that fake money as well.
So we're in trouble. And I think the more we examine the facts we face, the more concern I think any citizen who actually embraces the concepts of the Constitution and our republic need to be worried and take action. I'm not talking revolution. I'm talking about returning to the principles that establish this country on the path it's on. And I always say this, Ambassador Cooper was part of the Reagan administration. I think the Reagan folks got it the most right. They focused on how to return power to the American people and focus on those things which were necessary to protect America, to include winning the Cold War, which is no small feat. And I think we need to emulate what they did any way we can. So,
yeah, one of my favorite sayings was that I forget the right number, but the 11 most horrifying words in the English language were, "I'm from Washington and I'm here to help."
Yeah.
If I can just add one thing, I would ask every American to do is write your congressman and insist that your congressman look into the existing agencies of the U.S. government and their existing the document, the statement that says this is what the Department of fill in the blank is supposed to do, and just see if they're doing it. Insist that Congress go back and pick these various organizations and see if they're actually doing that.
Right. That's a good idea.
Thank you very much for being with us here on Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. If you like what you've watched or heard, please hit the subscribe button if you're on one of our video channels or on our audio channels as well. If you really enjoy us and you'd like to help us produce this content, please become a member of our Patreon page, patreon.com/thought2action. We also offer memberships on YouTube. Or you can check us out at our merch store. We have some cool new designs coming out soon. That is on Teespring. The link is in description. For our panel at the Herb London Center for Policy Research, and by the way, you can check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Getter, and of course our website, londoncenter.org. I'm Chris Cordani. Have a great day. Stay informed.